Hello, and welcome to my Merge at Karlov Manor limited set review. Today I'm going to be talking about the blue cards and how I think they're going to perform in limited. So, that's the whole deal. That's what you're signing up for today. This is how I grade cards. Let me just get out of the way so you can actually read what they are. I use a tier system. It may be a little bit different than some of the systems other people use. I like it. It has 5 tiers. It's very simple. Tier 1 is the best. Tier 5 is the worst. This is kind of a broad description of what the tiers mean. And if you need to stop and read it, go right ahead. That's what it's here for. Without further ado, we're just going to get right into the blue cards. Agency Outfitter, 4 blue for a 4/3 flying. When it enters the battlefield, you may search your library, hand, end, or graveyard for a card named Magnifying Glass and Thinking Cap and put them onto the battlefield. If you search your library this way, shuffle. So, let's think about this card. So, Thinking Cap and Magnifying Glass are colorless cards. Magnifying Glass is a reprint of a card, and Thinking Cap is new to this set. They're both like not very good cards. Thinking Cap is fine in Detectives. This is a Detective. You may play it in Detectives, although I think Detectives is probably more of an aggressive deck, so you don't really want this in that deck. 6 mana 4/3 flyer is not really what you're looking for. So I think in this, if on turn 6 you play this, you get a Thinking Cap and a Magnifying Glass. It's probably okay. It's probably like a tier 3 card. But the problem is that by putting this card in your deck, you're putting Magnifying Glass and Thinking Cap in your deck. And that's a problem, because those cards are not very good. And the payoff you get by having this card, draw them, I'm not seeing it. I'm really not seeing it. Maybe this just gets there, and it's fine, but a 6 mana 4/3 flyer there's a lot of 4/3 flyers in this set for some reason. It's not doing it for me, boss. I'm just not that interested to be 100% square with you. So that's how I feel about Agency Outfitter. Behind the Mask, single blue for an instant. As an additional cost to cast the spell, you may collect evidence 6. Until end of turn, target artifact or creature becomes an artifact creature with base power, not just 4/3. If evidence was collected, instead it becomes a 1/1. So basically what this does is, sometimes you make your thing into a 4/3, and sometimes you make your opponent's thing into a 1/1. Both of those modes are very bad. We just saw Relic's Roar in the last set make an artifact into a 4/3 until end of turn, unplayable card. Not a good card, not legal to put in your deck, very bad, horrible. So the front side of this is really bad. Now that was I think a sorcery, and this is an instant. Actually, I think that was also an instant. I don't think it really matters, to be honest with you. This having the additional modality of being like, yeah, well, maybe I'll make my opponent's thing into a 1/1 has bumped it all the way up to tier 4 instead of tier 5. I know that's a huge upgrade. But I do think this card is not horrendous, and you can actually play it in your deck and not lose the game instantly. Just, this isn't really where you want to be using your collect evidence. If you have a deck that's when you exile stuff from your graveyard and you, don't have enough collect evidence somehow, this could maybe get you there. But the problem is I think that deck is, blue-green, and that's just not a deck, so I'm not worried about that being an issue, really. But yeah, I think Behind the Mask is, not very good, but probably better than some of these effects have been historically. Benthic Criminologists, 4 any blue for a 4/5. When it enters the battlefield or attacks, you may sacrifice an artifact if you do draw a card. So I've put a 5-drop in tier 3, which is about as high as common 5-drops go. They don't generally go much higher than this, just because they are 5-mana spells, and with the fact that the spell costs 5 mana, there's just less value in taking the card early, and as a result, I rate it lower in my tiers, and it is less important because there's enough spells. It's I played something on turn 5 that's 5 mana. Sure. Do I think this is appreciably better than some of the other 5-drops in this set? Yes, and that's why it's in tier 3 instead of tier 4. Usually 5-drops, it's kind of your baseline is it's a tier 4 card, kind of, because it's just this. They're not flexible cards. And let me preface this by saying, I am somebody that actually plays 5-drops in their deck. When I get to draft my ideal limited deck, it's kind of I draft 8 2-drops, a bunch of 3, some 6 3-drops. This is just a ballpark. 4 4-drops and 2 5-drops, 1 to 2 5-drops. So I want 1 to 2 of these type of cards in my deck, but they're just really replaceable, and this type of card is kind of representative of that. Although I do think it's not bad for a 5-drop. That's kind of how I feel about this card. Bubble Smuggler. 1 and a blue for a 2/1 with Disguise for 5 and a blue. When it's turn face up, put 4+1/+1 counters on it. So On turn 2, this is illegal. It is illegal to play a 2-1 for 2. I know some people are saying, no, it's legal. I can play a 2-1 for 2. No, no, no. It is actually, you will actually be put into prison if you play a 2-mana 2-1 in the year 2024 in Limited. You will actually not be allowed to see your family. It's a life sentence. You can't do it. Not allowed. So don't think that that's like a buyout that is acceptable. It's not. Unacceptable. So the only mode on this card is I'm going to play a 3-mana 2-2 Word 2, and then on 6, I'm going to flip it up and make a 6-5. And that's just not exciting to me. Has no types, also, no types, not a detective, not an artifact. So I just think this card is horrible. Maybe even tier 4 is too high, and I should put it in tier 5, but I kind of don't hate that it does do disguise stuff and is like a big dude in the late game. So I don't know. That's how I feel. I don't like Bubble Smuggler. But it is 2 mana. Burden of Proof. Speaking of 2 mana, 1 and a blue for an enchantment aura with flash. Enchanting creature gets +2/+2 as long as it's a detective you control. Otherwise, it has base power and toughness 1/1 and can't block detectives. So in detectives, I think this card is like pretty good because you can kind of use it as a combat trick in both directions. If your opponent's holding up mana, you probably want to shrink their thing. If they're not holding up mana, you probably want to buff your thing. That's kind of a good way to think about this. And yeah, you can do either. It's really nice to have that flexibility, and I think this is actually going to be a pretty good card. It may even be I may even be rating this too low. This does have the caveat that this type of removal tends to generally not be very good, and I still think it suffers from some of those problems. It is an enchantment that does have some things that kind of matter a little bit in this set, but not an enormous thing to keep in mind. Candlestick, single blue mana for a clue equipment. Equipped creature gets +1/+1 and has, when this creature attacks, surveil 2, and it is equipped for 2, and you can pay 2 to sacrifice it and draw a card. Notably, you do not have to tap the equipment to sacrifice it, which is weird because usually you have to do that these days. So I don't know why these don't have to tap to sacrifice them. Maybe it's because of templating. Maybe that's how clues are. Look, man, I don't know. I don't know about all that. Yeah, I mean this card's like I don't like this type of equipment tends to be very bad. Like when they do in a cycle, and they've been doing this a lot lately. For the past 3 sets, I think it's 2 or 3 sets. Did they do this in Eldraine? No, they didn't do it in Eldraine. But in LCI, they did a full cycle of equipment. I don't know if they did one in March. No, I think it's just LCI. I'm just recency biased up here. But yeah, these type of equipment where it's like this has to attack to do the thing. It just doesn't. It's just not very good. Like the attacks surveil 2, and just paying 1. Like I think this card's not horrendous. It is an artifact and in blue, which does matter. So I think that's what is saving this from tier 5 and being completely unplayably garbage. But I have put it into tier 4 because I just don't really have a lot of hope for it. Case of the Filched Falcon. Single blue mana for a case. When it enters the battlefield, you investigate. To solve, you have 3 or more artifacts, and when it is solved, you may pay 2 in a blue and sacrifice this case. But 4/+1/+1 counters on target non-creature artifact. It becomes a 0/0 bird creature with flying in addition to its other types. So, I actually maybe should put this into tier 1. The reason I didn't is because you do need a critical mass of things that generate artifacts in your deck. I don't think that's going to be too hard. You only need 2 other artifacts. 2 artifacts to be in play. And you can play this on turn 1, and the worst case scenario is you play it on turn 1, and then at some point during the game you're like, I'm not going to get there, we're just going to buy out of this and draw a card. And it's not that bad, because it's 1 mana play, and 1 mana you can weave in, you can fit 1 mana in anywhere in your curve, generally. And I really like this card. I think this card's really good, and has a lot, it's basically 3 mana to make a 4/4, because the one that you're paying, again, if it's on turn 1, that's basically just free mana that you're spending, because you generally, 1-drop's not super easy to do, especially in blue. Not a ton of tap lands in this set. There are some, obviously, but they're mostly rare. So, I don't know. I think, you're going to be finding yourself playing this card, and I think this is a real reason to draft blue. To be honest with you, I think this is a real reason to put blue cards in your deck. I think this is going to be one of blue's stronger uncommons. I really like it. The fact that it gets flying too is just so it's a 4/4 flying for 3 mana. My god. And can you do it on turn 3? Realistically, no. Well, actually, definitely no, because you have to solve it. But on turn 4, yeah, you could solve this on turn 4, and then on turn 5 be attacking with a 4/4 flyer. That's pretty good. It's pretty good. Case of the Ransacked Lab. 2 and a blue for a case. Instant and sorcery spells you cast cost 1 less to cast. And you've cast 4 or more instant and sorcery spells this turn. You solve it, and it is solved whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell, you draw a card. Obviously, if you solve this, it's great, but that doesn't ever happen, so this card's not playable. And that's all I'm going to talk about. I'm not even going to acknowledge anything else about the card, really. Cold Case Cracker. 3 and a blue for a 3/3 Spirit Detective with flying. When it dies, you investigate. So this is really interesting. This card it's got me feeling all sorts of ways. So, first things first, it is a 4 mana 3/3 flyer. That is bad. That is a tier 4 base. Realistically, that's a tier 4 base. Like, 4 mana 3/3 flyer is a tier 4 card. I have bumped it up a tier, a whole entire tier, by the dies investigate trigger. And because it's a detective also, partially. And because the set may be a little slower, so 4 mana 3/3 flyer is not as bad as it usually is. I have bumped it up a lot. I think this is very generous, rating this a tier 3. I'm going to preface this and say that it will move down very quickly to tier 4, where I expect it probably will end up, actually. Like, kind of like this is kind of, but I do actually think that in blue, dies investigate is actively better than dies draw a card. I know that's counterintuitive, but making the artifact is relevant for cards like we just saw. And I kind of like, there's something about it. It's just kind of like, yeah, I'm kind of in for a 4 mana 3/3 flyer in this format for some reason. So, I don't know. I think on 4 mana, there are concerns that 4 mana is not a mana cost of card that you really want to be casting in this format, just because you want to be flipping your disguise creatures for 2 and then playing a 2-drop on 4. But I mean, something to be said about, just play a 4 mana 3/3 flyer and eventually you're going to draw a card off it. It's pretty good. We did see in Lord of the Rings Ithilien Kingfisher that card was unplayably bad, and this card is better than that card. I think almost certainly this card is better than that card, because the 3 mana 2/1 flyer is almost useless, and in that format it was especially bad. This format, I think a 4 mana 3/3 flyer has enough going for it that I am going to put it into tier 3. Though I am cautious about this one. I'm cautious. You obviously don't want to load up on them. I think my guess is what they did is they tried to make this a 4 mana 3/3 flyer that when at ETBs you investigate, and it was too good, and they had to make it not do that. Because that's what I would have done. I would have said, you know what? We're going for it, boys. We're going to make it ETB investigate. And then it was like the best blue common by a lot. And they were like, okay, fine, we can roll it back to make it on dies. Which, again, if this were investigate, if this were ETB investigate, it would be like mind-blowingly good. It would be so good. It would be unbelievable. But that's how I feel. That's how I feel about this card. Conspiracy Unraveler. 5 blue for a 6/6 flying. You may collect evidence 10 rather than pay the cost of spells that you cast. So realistically, how many times are you going to be able to collect evidence 10? Like 2, maybe, when you cast this card? And also, realistically, are you going to have spells left in your hand to cast when you cast this card? And the answer to both of those questions is kind of no. So, I don't love it, but I don't think it's terrible. Like a 7 mana 6/6 flyer, like as bad as it looks, it's still pretty big. Like, it's still large. Like, we saw this with Bringer the Last Gift, where that card was an 8 mana 6/6 flyer. Now, it did do like Wrath your opponent's board, but like, I think that card, its performance statistics wise was too good for it to just be good in decks that were built around it. Which means that an 8 mana 6/6 flyer, it's not that bad. Like, it's not as bad as you might think. And this card, it might not be as bad as, it's 7 mana 6/6 flyer. It's big. I don't know. At the end of the day, it can end a game. It's just, not super great or anything. Coveted Falcon. 1 blue for a 1/4 flyer with disguise for 1 on the blue. When it attacks, you gain control of target permanent you own but don't control. Why on earth is this written before the disguise? I don't understand. It does actually make it read a little bit better, though. I don't know. Card visual design moment. When it's turn face up, target opponent gains control of any number of target permanents you control. Draw a card for each one they gain control of this way. So basically, the joke is on turn 4, you disguise this on 3. On turn 4, you flip it. You give him control of one thing. You draw a card. You have a 1/4 flyer. Hey, that's not so bad. And then if you're feeling like really good about yourself, you can like give them a clue. Like you can give them like 2 things, and then one of them is like a clue, and then no, that's too greedy. I don't know. Anyway, you get to take your thing back, and you get a free card. It did cost like all of your tempo, but that's fine. You don't need tempo. Where we're going, we don't need tempo. I think this card's fine. I don't think it's like super good or anything. It is like you're basically never ever casting this as a 3 mana 1/4 flyer. Like that's just not a legal card at all. Like it's not legal. So you're gonna disguise it. You're gonna flip it. You're gonna draw a card. You're gonna get a 1/4. I think that's okay. I don't think it's great, but I think it's okay. Crime Stopper Sprite. 2 and a blue for a 2/2. As it is cost to cast the spell, you may collect evidence 6, and it has flying. When it enters the battlefield, you tap target creature, and if evidence was collected, you put a stun counter on it. So we've seen this type of card before. Your whatever it's called, I don't know what the card's called. Tap something down, leave it tapped. Whatever. This is actually like a strict downgrade of Frost Trickster, I believe it was, where it just did this when it ETB'd. Does the strict downgrade actually matter? No. In fact, the fact that you get to collect evidence can sometimes be upside. And again, like you're never like, does it matter that their thing has like, I don't know. I think it's okay. I think it's a fine card. Whatever. I don't think it's super important, but I think it's fine. You can play it. The 3 drops are not a premium in this format. This is not going to be a premium card, I think. Yeah. It's really going to be tough to take 3 drops highly in this format, I would say. Cryptic Coat. 2 and a blue for an equipment. There's an artifact. When it enters the battlefield, cloak the top card of your library and then attach the Cryptic Coat to it. Cryptic creature gets +1/+0 and can't be blocked, and you can pay 1 and a blue and return it to its owner's hand. So this is kind of like its own little value engine. You cloak something, and then you can cast it later, and then you can return this to your hand, or you can just have like a thing that's unblockable. You just make a 3. Like it's just a little value engine. It's like the base rate is it's a 3 mana 3/2 unblockable, and that's not bad by any means. And then you're just gonna start making a bunch of stuff. Like your opponent basically has to try to answer this, or you're gonna start running away with the game. And you can just block and then return it to your hand, and then it just seems solid. It just seems like a solid card. Not like uber busted or anything, but definitely good. I think definitely worthy of being up there. Curious Inquiry. Single blue mana for an enchantment. Enchanted creature gets +1/+1 and has whenever this creature deals combat damage to a player, investigate. No, thank you. We have seen this type of effect before, and it is not good. It was very fun in Wilds of Eldraine to put Curiosity on a catapult. That was actually a real thing to do. It was fun. I did do it. It was fun. It was a good time. I liked it. This is not that card. This card is not that card. There's no catapult. Art's pretty cool, though. Can we talk about the art? Look at the art. Man. Anyways. Deduce. 1 and a blue for an instant. Draw a card, investigate. Simple as that. I like Deduce. I don't like it as much as this bad boy right here. This is not Eyes of Gitaxias, okay? It's not. You may think, oh, this looks a lot like Eyes of Gitaxias. Not Eyes of Gitaxias. Eyes of Gitaxias impacted the board, made a 3/3. 3/3 is big. The difference between a 2/2 and a 3/3 is significant. Anyways, this card is still pretty good, I think, because it enables you to hold up some mana. It also, this is very important. It works on both ends of the turn 4. Flip your 2 mana morph creature thing that disguises for 2. Flip that and then use the other 2 mana to do something. This works on both ends of that. And I think that's actually really important because you're going to need to find ways to spend that extra 2 mana effectively. And this is just really nice to help you do that. And I think that's actually really an important element of this card that is, maybe wouldn't necessarily like be super obvious or be true in all sets. I think this format specifically, the way they've designed the disguise mechanic, I think benefits this card greatly. This card may even be like tier 2. I could see myself valuing it like that. It is pure card draw though, pretty much. So that you gotta want the artifact, really. You gotta want the artifact, and you're gonna want the artifact. So that's kind of how I feel about it. Dramatic Accusation. 2 and a blue for an enchantment. When it enters the battlefield, tap enchanted creature. Enchanted creature doesn't untap during its controller's untap step, and you can pay blue and shuffle enchanted creature into its owner's library. Have they done it? Have they printed a functional blue on the board removal spell for 3 mana? Have they done it? I think we might be getting there. This looks an awful lot like the card from Vow, the 3 mana enchantment from Vow that tapped, that was like white that did this, basically. That card made a blood token and was 5 mana to exile their thing or whatever. This card shuffles it back in their library, which is not as good, but it's not, it's pretty good. It's not as good, but it's pretty good. And so you don't have to do that. I mean, I'd still not put it in like tier 2. I still don't think it's premium, but it looks like it might be decent, and that's how I feel about it. Eliminate the impossible. 1 in a blue for an instant. Creatures you control get -2/-0 until end of turn. Creatures your opponents control, sorry. If any of them are suspected, they're no longer suspected. So, this card looks great to me. It reminds me of Startle, which was an excellent card. This card is probably better than Startle, although Startle did make a zombie, but the zombie couldn't block. So similarly, like, not impacting the board immediately. But yeah, like this type of card, the getting rid of the suspicion stuff too, so you can get rid of like they're not menace anymore. I really like it. It makes an artifact. It makes your opponent's attack horrible. Like sometimes your opponent's just gonna cast this, and you attacked with like 3 things. And it's just like they just made it like the worst attack ever, and then you just lost the game. Like this card like sometimes does that. Now it doesn't always do that, but I think it does it enough of the time that it just looks really good to me. Exit Specialist, 1 in a blue for a 2/1. Can't be blocked by creatures with power 3 or greater, and it is disguised for 1 in a blue. When it's turned to face up, return another target creature to its owner's hand, and it can be any creature you want. It can be your opponent's creature, it can be your creature. It's only 1 in a blue to flip it up. This might even be tier 1. I don't think it's quite there because it doesn't quite generate any value, but it does. It's a lot of high tempo plays are for high tempo players, and this is a high tempo play to 2 mana bounce your thing, make a 2/1. Like it's pretty good, but it's pretty good. It's the reason they don't print that card. Obviously it's not that. It's 3 mana disguise, and then you get there eventually, but still we are happy, and I do like this card quite a bit. I said earlier that it is illegal to play a 2/1 on 2. It is in fact legal to play this card on turn 2. You will not immediately lose the game. It is still very bad, but you will not immediately lose the game if you do that, because this one can sometimes be unblockable. So that's the rules. Although still maybe still a misdemeanor, maybe not quite a felony to play this on turn 2. Feyflight, 1 in a blue for a flash enchantment. Aura. When it enters the battlefield, enchanted creature gains hexproof until end of turn. Enchanted creature gets +1/+0 and has flying. Look at this. Now, astute observers will note that blue creatures often already have flying, and that is true. So that does make this a little bit worse, because it's like, the flying doesn't matter that much, as much for some creatures, and that's accurate. However, we've seen this type of effect before in like the Mantle and Theros Beyond Death, I think it was. Now that had an enchantment theme, so it didn't give flying. We saw the 0/1 in Merchant Machine do this type of thing, and this type of effect is just good. 2 mana for this type of effect, leave something on the battlefield, enhance your creature in some way after the effect. Really strong. And this one giving flying, excellent, really excellent. I think it's going to be a really strong card. Forensic Gadgeteer, almost botched it. 2 in a blue for a 2/3 when you cast an artifact spell, investigate. Activated abilities of artifacts you control cost 1 less to activate. This effect can't reduce the mana in the cost to less than 1 mana. So obviously you can make your crack your clues for 1, sure, whatever. Don't think that's actually super relevant. 3 mana 2/3. 3 mana 2/3 is not as bad as it would be. 3 mana 2/3 not as bad as it usually would be, because your opponent's going to be playing a 3 mana 2/2 sometimes, some percentage of the time. And so I would say that, this card, for that reason, is put into tier 3. Now, some of you may be saying, wow, this is tier 3. Obviously, if your deck is like tons of artifacts, there's just not. Like, there just are not that many artifacts. I've looked over the set. The artifacts, the colorless artifacts are not particularly inspiring. The blue artifacts are worse. And it's not like, if it was when an artifact enters the battlefield, I'd be like, ooh, man, so good. But because you have to cast an artifact spell, it's just really takes a lot of it. Like, because artifacts, they have they kind of take up slots in your deck. Like they aren't generally impacting the board by themselves, and so it can be really tough. And there's not artifact again. There's not really artifact creatures in this set, so I'm just really not seeing it with this guy. But I think it's fine. I think you can play it in some decks, and reducing the activated abilities of artifacts is nice. So. Forensic Researcher, 2 and a blue for a 1/3. You can tap it to untap another target permanent you control, or you can collect evidence 3 and tap it and tap target creature you don't control. Yeah, I originally had this lower, and then I kind of was like, I don't hate this so much. It's obviously very similar to the guy in Adventures of the Forgotten Realms, the whatever his name was, the 2/3 that did this but didn't have the tap ability. The mana elf. It's basically like a mana elf in blue that also sometimes in the late game, and collect evidence 3 is cheap. Like, you're going to be able to collect evidence 3. If you want to tap your opponent's creature down for 4 turns, you're going to be able to do that on turn 8. Like, you're just going to be able to do that. So, I would say that this does have late game impact, and I think the ramp is not completely meaningless. It does also allow you to present like attack with vigilance too. Like this has like a lot of small little things that I kind of like it, so I've put it into tier 3 because I think it's a solid card, but I don't think it's super excellent or anything. Furtive Courier, 2 and a blue for a 3/2. It can't be blocked as long as you've sacrificed an artifact this turn, and whenever it attacks, draw a card, then discard a card. Not super thrilled about it. A 3/2 in a world of 3 mana 2/2s. Not the best stat line, but can't be blocked as long as you set an artifact this turn. And that is going to be happening with some regularity. So, I mean, again, like that unblockability is nice. There are payoffs for drawing your second card. So, yeah, I mean, I really don't hate this card, but I don't love it either. It's I actually should probably bump it down a tier even. I think it is worse than the common, which we'll see later. That essentially does this, but on ETB. And I don't know. The unblockability is nice. I do kind of like that. I just have a hard time believing that it's going to trigger all the time. Hotshot Investigators, 5 and a blue for a 4/4 detective. When it enters the battlefield, return up to 1 other target creature to its owner's hand. If you controlled it, investigate. So this card. So we remember Air Elemental, not Air Elemental. Is it Air Elemental? The 2/5, the 6 mana 2/5 flyer that bounces a thing. I mean, that card was pretty good. That was Blue's best common in AFR. Not that that means anything, but if it meant something, it would mean something. What I would say about this card is I like it. It doesn't look like a me type of card. It's like it's 6 mana 4/4. It's so bad. How to play 6 mana 4/4? Is it 2010? To a certain extent, you are right. But what I would also say is, in some games, you are going to, returning something to your hand is actually going to happen sometimes. It is actually going to be a thing that you actively want to do sometimes. And a 6 mana 4/4 is, not the worst. We saw Cinemas Benthesor come in, and it did some work. It was a decent card in LCI if you were building your deck right. This card, I think, requires a lot less work and can do something similar and has the option to just be hey, I remove your biggest thing and get a nice attack in, and then I have a 4/4, and that's a totally valid way to use this card, right? So, I don't hate it. Intrude on the Mind, there's some banger artworks in this set. I'm loving these. 3 blue for an instant. Reveal the top 5 cards of your library and separate them into 2 piles. An opponent chooses one of those piles, put that pile into your hand, and the other into your graveyard. You create a 0/0 colorless Thopter artifact creature token with flying, and then put a +1/+1 counter on it for each card that put into your graveyard this way. So, essentially what this does is, there are 3 ways you can split your cards. 5/0, 4/1, and 3/2. Those are the 3 ways you can split your cards. If you split it 3/2, you were either getting a 2/2 or a 3/3 flyer. If you split it 4/1, you were either getting a 4/4 or a 1/1 flyer. And if you split it 5/0, you were either getting a 5/5 or a 0/0 flyer. All of those options are great when you think about the fact that you are drawing the other amount of cards. I put this into tier 1. Now, this is a little ambitious. I put it into tier 1 because I think that what you want to do with this card is you want to split this 4/1 most of the time. The reason I say that is a 4/4 flyer is enormous, right? So if your opponent gives you basically what you want to do is split it best card, and then 4 cards that like you don't. And obviously, sometimes it's going to depend on how much you need the cards and all this context. But sometimes you're going to be like, my opponent's going to give me a 4/4 flyer and give me my best card. Deal, like actually deal. And that's something that, like that's like is that like the worst case scenario? I don't know. You could I think the actual worst case scenario is your opponent gives you 2 cards and you make a 3/3 flyer. I think that's like that's I think the actual worst case. Or I guess you draw 5 and like die or whatever. I don't know. Anyway, this card just has so many like it just always goes well for you. I know that your opponent gets to choose the pile to give to you. I get that. However, it does not like there's just no. They just don't have any good options. There's just no good. Like if your opponent like is like, all right, your board's empty. They attack you with a 2/2 and you cast this. What a nightmare! Like what a nightmare! Like it's horrendous. It's so bad. And then if they pass, like they're just like, okay, well, I make a 4/4, and then I'm gonna pass my turn, and then you cast this. They're just like, oh my god, like how am I beating this card? And it's just like you're never beating it. You're never beating this card because your opponent has now drawn. You like again. I think this is why splitting 4/1 is so good. It's like either you get a 1/1 flyer and draw 4 cards. 4 cards. It does not matter what the cards are. You were drawing 4 of them. Or you get a 4/4 flyer for 5 that draws you a card and puts 4 cards in your graveyard. Like these are just crazy rates. These rates are just unreal good. This card is so unreal good. I love this card. It's so good. It's also a mythic, so me ranting about how good it does not matter at all. You are basically never going to see this, and I don't know why I'm talking about it for so long. It's because I love it. That's why. It's because I like this card a lot, and it appeals to me. Okay. Jaded Analyst. This is actually me. This is I'm the Jaded Analyst. 1 and a blue for a 3/2 defender. When you draw a second card each turn, it loses defender and gains vigilance. Sure, fine. The vigilance is actually really nice on this type of card because you do kind of want to trade off with them. That's kind of like what you want to do with these type of defenders. And actually, I should move this up a tier. Tier 4 is too low. Hold on. The magic of editing. Yeah, so I talked myself up on this card in the last 30 seconds and decided to move it up to tier 3. The reason is very simple. Like, this is like this. When I talk about illegal 2-drops, this card is legal. Oh man, is this card legal to play on turn 2? Oh man, it is hard to find a blue 2-mana spell that is legal to cast on turn 2 and not lose the game. This one's fine. And even if like your worst case scenario is like, oh man, I traded with their 3-mana morph guy. It's like it's not that bad. Like you're still trading up on mana. It has vigilance, so we can blah. I like it. It's nice. I like this card. Living Conundrum, and it is a conundrum. 4 and a blue for 2/5 hexproof. There's other text on this card. The other text on the card does not matter. It is a 4-mana 2/5 hexproof, and that is all that matters about it. A 4-mana 2/5 hexproof is not a good card, so I'm not going to be talking about the card anymore. If the other text on the card happens to matter in a game that you play limited, you have done something wrong or something very right. If you are the one who cares about it. But yeah, no, it's not dumb. Yeah. Lost in the Maze. X blue for an enchantment with flash. When it enters the battlefield, tap X target creatures. Put stun counter on each of those creatures you do not control. Tapped creatures you control have hexproof. Yeah, this card's really nice. It's really flexible. It does a bunch of stuff. Taps down your opponent's things and puts stun counters on them. Puts stun counters on your opponent's stuff. And sometimes you just save your sometimes you save your thing from like a rule spell too. It's just really flexible card. Now it is X blue. X blue is not cheap. It's not a cheap way. So this is 3 mana to tap one thing. So it's 3 mana to save your thing. 3 mana tricks are not good. They are not good. They're bad. They're very bad. However, 4 mana to tap 2 of your opponent's things, put 2 stun counters on them. Tap creatures with my control have hexproof for the rest of the game. That's not so bad. Right? That's not. And then it's just the flexibility is what makes this card good. I do not think you're going to be wanting to use this as a 3 mana protection spell. I think that's generally bad. You don't really want to do that. But if you have to, in some circumstances, it will come up, and it will be great for you when it does. It also means that if you're attacking, like if you like, you don't even have to tap. Like if you already have something that's tapped and your opponent is trying to kill your tapped thing, you don't even have to do. You can just play this for 2 and not even tap anything, and still it does that. So it has lots of like weird niche synergy stuff, but I think it's generally good. So happy about it. Mistway Spy. Single blue mana for a 1/1 flyer with disguise for 1 and a blue. When it is turn face up until end of turn, whenever a creature you control deals combat damage to a player, investigate. So, a couple of things to note about this card. I do not think this card's very good. However, I do think it's okay, just because it's a detective and it does, like, you know, in the late game you can use it to draw some cards, and that's, you know, fine. I think generally, like, I think this card, the way I feel about this card essentially is this. When I have this card in my opening hand, I am going to be playing it on turn 1. Why? Well, because it's a 1 mana 1/1 flyer. And I think that this is a 1 mana 1/1 flyer is genuinely better than flipping it. Now that's kind of an indictment. That is a little bit of an indictment on the backside of this card of flipping it and like maybe getting to investigate multiple times. It's a little bit of an indictment, but I think that is actual flexibility. I think that is actually a real amount of flexibility that matters. And I would say that like the amount of mana that you're spending on this it is a lot of mana. It is 5 mana over 2 turns, like 5 mana over 2 turns, which is not 5 mana, but it's also not 5 mana. It's very clear. It is definitely 5 total mana. So I do have some issues with this card, but I also don't think it's like completely unplayable. Out Cold. 3 and a blue for an instant. Spell cannot be countered. Tap up to 2 target creatures and put a stun counter on each of them. Investigate. I have no idea why it lets you tap your own creatures, but maybe because of the other rare. Sure. Yeah, this card's really good. I like this card quite a bit. Now, again, the reason it's in tier 4, and I say, oh, really good, it sounds like a tier 2 card. And it may actually end up being there. It may this end up being one of Blue's better commons. I have concerns about Blue as like a tempo color. I'm just not quite feeling it. I'm just not quite seeing the stuff that I need to see for Blue to actually really get there. I do have concerns about Blue in this format. We saw in LCI, hey, Blue got like the best common in the format. It's a 3 mana 2/2 flyer that generates value when it enters the battlefield. Hey, Blue did not get a 3 mana 2/2 flyer that generates value when it enters the battlefield this format. It's probably not going to be as good. It's kind of the recipe for success with Blue being a good color and limited. However, I do like this card quite a bit because, you know, we've seen effects like this that are 4 mana tap 2 things and puts like stun counters on them, and they just haven't quite gotten there. And I think that investigating is probably going to push this over the top. Similar to the white board pump spell that gives +2/+1 and investigates, just having that little bit of like game of like the game doesn't have to end when I like after the two turns after I cast this, because I still am investigating. I'm getting my card back eventually. I'm generating an artifact, and it's the amount of tempo I'm generating may be enough to just win me the game. So I do like it quite a bit. Prof's Eidetic Memory. 1 and a blue for a legendary enchantment. When it enters the battlefield, draw a card. You have no maximum hand size. Great. Really relevant. At the beginning of combat in a turn, if you draw more than 1 card this turn, put X +1/+1 counters on target creature, where X is that number of cards you draw in this turn -1. So yeah, if you draw cards, you get to put +1/+1 counters on your stuff. I put this in tier 4 because I think that it not impacting the board by itself is just really bad. It's 2 mana. Now, again, there I think is a little bit more space than there usually would be in this set for the 2 mana things that don't impact the board by themselves, because of that turn 4 2 mana flip a disguise extra 2 mana that you're just going to have in games. Like it's just going to be there. You're just going to have the option to do stuff like this with that extra 2 mana, and that's where I think cards like this could shine. However, I still don't like it because you just having to draw the cards pre-combat, and then you have to commit to putting the stuff on stuff pre-combat. It's just not impacting the board by itself. I have it in tier 4. I just don't love it. Projector Inspector. 2 and a blue for a 3/2. When it or another detective enters the battlefield under your control, when a detective you control is turned face up, you may draw a card. If you do, discard a card. Yeah, nice little enabler. It's a detective. It's a three. Again, one of the concerns I have with this is it is a 3-drop, and 3-drops are extremely low priority. Extremely low priority in this format. They are extremely low, especially a 3-2. Especially is very, very low priority in the draft. You do not need to draft 3-drops ever. You should just basically. I think that deduce. You should almost never take my prediction is you should literally almost never take this over Deduce, and the reason is that Deduce is 2 mana and this is 3, and it's just so much more valuable to draft something that is 2 mana in this format. It does not matter if Deduce is like that much worse of a card, doesn't impact the board. It's just like you're gonna have stuff to do on turn 3 no matter what, and it's really important to always be able to do stuff at any point in the game. And this card I think is fine, but in a normal format, but this format specifically I may have some concerns. Reasonable Doubt. 1 and a blue for an instant, counter target spell unless its controller pays 2, and you may suspect up to 1 target creature. I really like this. We have seen Quench be very good before. It has been good each of the last 2 times it was printed in Spell Stutter and what's it called? The one that's from Streets of New Capenna. Anyways, that card was better, partially because blue was a better color, but nonetheless. Yeah, I mean this type of Quench variants are really good, and the fact that the suspect goes to not like to any creature, it can go to your creature, it can go to your opponent's creature. Very nice. Now on turn 2, is that gonna matter? No, but do you care? Also no. Like this card's great on the draw. Cards that are good on the draw are valuable. They're inherently valuable because you are going to be on the draw 50% of the time. Do you feel great about countering your opponent's disguise on 3? No. Are you gonna do it every single time? Yes, you are. That is like, again, on the draw, this is basically guaranteed to have a counter target. Like, you are almost 100%, like, you can leave this up on 2. Like, I would say that in blue decks, based on the 2-drops we've seen, you should be leaving this up on turn 2, like, every time, if you can, because, like, especially if you're on the draw, because your opponent is going to have a 3-drop. They are going to have one. That just is going to happen. And as a result of that, this card is going to be very good. And sometimes the suspect matters too. You never know. Sometimes it's good for you, sometimes it's bad for you. Yeah, it's nice, it's optional. Reenact the crime. 1 blue for an instant. Exile target non-land card in a graveyard that was put there from anywhere this turn. Copy it, you may cast the copy without paying its mana cost. Nope. The first issue with this card is it's triple blue, which, as we know, is not good for limited, and the second issue with this card is that it is way too much setup for not a payoff, and I'm not going to talk about it anymore because it is not a card that matters. Steam Core Scala. He's got a nice hat. 2 and a blue for a 2/2 Flying Vigilance. When it enters the battlefield, draw 2 cards, then discard 2 cards unless you discard an instant or sorcery card or a creature with flying. Woo! So, when you first read this card, you're like, is this really a tier 1 card? And I was like, oh, this is just Inspiring Overseer. This is literally just a better version of Inspiring Overseer, so why would I... It's not. You have to discard... but, like, it is, though. Like, it is. It kind of is better. Like, it has Vigilance, you know. It can trade. It does give you more optionality. Sometimes, like, putting more stuff in your graveyard in this format is actually, like, an upside because of... collecting evidence, and blue is a collecting evidence color. I like this card quite a bit. I've put it into tier 1. I like it a lot. I think it's really good. Sunset Back. 2 blue for an instant. The owner of target spell or non-land permanent puts it on the top or bottom of their library. Woo! Man. Now this is removal. You want to talk about removal? This is blue. This is like... I can't believe they've done it. I genuinely cannot believe that they've printed this card. This card is so good. Ooh, it is so good because it helps you with all of blue's problems. Yes, this card is like so important. And that's why I've put it in tier 2. You know, you might say, oh, this is tier 3, you know, whatever. It is double pipped, that is a concern, right? We do mana bases matter here, but yeah, I mean, this is just super excellent. Like sometimes you like you may think, oh, delaying their spell for a turn, is that really that good? These cards always play better than they read. They always play better than they read, and this is an example of a card that's just like I love these. They're always good. Surveillance Monitor, 3 and a blue for a 3/3. When it enters the battlefield, you may collect evidence 4, and when you collect evidence, you create a 1/1 call a stop your creature artifact token with flying. So this is not collect evidence 6, which is interesting. Be advised. I would say this. If this card just entered the battlefield and it was a 3/3 and made a 1/1 flyer, this is the same tier I would put it in. I am treating it as if that is the case a large percentage of the time. And the reason for that is very simple. I think you're going to have stuff to do on turn 4 that is not this if you want, and as a result, you do not have to play it on turn 4, and because playing on turn 4, if you don't get the 1/1, it's a nightmare. It's a nightmare. You can't do it. Not legal. You can't do it. So, I think this is going to get there. I'm kind of like putting my faith, like my heart and soul into this card. But I do believe in this card. So, I think it is going to get there. And the final card in blue is Unauthorized Exit. 1 and a blue for instant return target on the permanent to its owner's hand, and you surveil 1. Yeah, I put this in tier 3. I think this is fine. You can play it. I don't think it's going to be super great or anything. I don't think it is as good as the one from the last set, which performed really high. It performed at a tier 2 level. This card will not be as good as that card because that card made a artifact token when you cast it most of the time if you were good at the game. This one only surveils, but surveil, very good. Good with collect evidence, good with a bunch of stuff. It is 2 mana, which I've talked about. Very, very important mana value of card to have, especially in this format, but in all limited formats, 2 mana is the magic number of mana in limited Magic these days. And that's it. That's all I got. That's all the blue cards. I hope you enjoyed me during my journey today. And if you did, I'll see you next time.